Welcome to Fun Facts Online. Let's jump right in. Think about your digital life. Your private photos, your work documents, your entire email history. It's all floating around in the cloud, right? But what is the cloud? It's not some ethereal mist. It's a network of massive, physical data centers spread across the globe. Your data might be stored in a server farm in Oregon, backed up in Ireland, and accessed by you in Japan. This global system is what makes the cloud so powerful, scalable, and cheap. But it also creates a monumental legal headache. What happens when a law enforcement agency in one country needs access to your data, which is stored on a server in another country? This isn't a hypothetical. It's a daily reality at the center of a battle between technology, privacy, and law. Today, we're navigating the digital fog to understand the architecture of lawful access, or how governments get their hands on your data in the cloud. It all revolves around something called the digital subpoena. The traditional idea of a police officer showing up with a piece of paper to get a filing cabinet of documents is ancient history. Today, that piece of paper is a digital request that can cross oceans in an instant, compelling a company to turn over data stored thousands of miles away. But how did we get here, and what rules govern this new reality? To understand the present, we have to look back to a law written before most of us had even heard of the internet. In the United States, the foundational law is the Stored Communications Act, or SCA, passed way back in 1986. The SCA was part of the Electronic Communications Privacy Act, and for its time, it was revolutionary. It was designed to protect the privacy of our burgeoning digital lives. The law created a tiered system. If the government wanted the actual content of your communications, like the body of an email, they generally needed a full-blown search warrant, which requires probable cause. But for non-content records, like your name, your IP address, or who you've been emailing, they could often get away with a lower standard, like a subpoena. The SCA also tried to define different types of service providers, like email providers versus data storage services. The level of protection your data received could depend on whether you had opened an email or how long it had been sitting on a server. But here's the fatal flaw. The SCA was designed for a world where you downloaded your emails to your personal computer. It never imagined a world of Gmail or Dropbox, where our data lives permanently on a company's servers. This mismatch has led to years of court battles, trying to fit the square peg of modern cloud computing into the round hole of a 1986 law. The biggest challenge, however, was geography. The Stored Communications Act was silent on whether a U.S. warrant could force a U.S. company to hand over data stored on servers outside the United States. This question exploded onto the world stage in a landmark case, United States versus Microsoft, often called the Microsoft Ireland case. The U.S. government, investigating a drug trafficking case, served Microsoft with a warrant for emails. The catch? Those emails were stored on a Microsoft server in Dublin, Ireland. Microsoft refused, arguing that a U.S. warrant stops at the U.S. border. They claimed the government couldn't reach into a server in a sovereign foreign nation. This fight went all the way to the Supreme Court, perfectly capturing the conflict between the borderless nature of the cloud and the territory-based nature of law. So if a U.S. warrant couldn't reach data in Ireland, what was the alternative? The old-school method was something called a Mutual Legal Assistance Treaty, or MLAT. These are agreements between countries to help each other in criminal investigations. Sounds good in theory, right? In practice, the MLAT process is a bureaucratic nightmare. A request from law enforcement in one country has to be formally sent to a central authority in the other, then wind its way through multiple government agencies, and finally go to a local court to issue an order to the service provider. This process is notoriously slow. The average time to get data through an MLAT request is estimated to be around 10 months. In a digital investigation, 10 months is an eternity. Evidence can be deleted, suspects can disappear, and the trail goes cold. The system was simply overwhelmed by the sheer volume of data requests in the digital age. Law enforcement was stuck in the slow lane while crime was happening at the speed of light. This brings us back to the Microsoft Ireland case, poised before the Supreme Court in 2018. Just as the justices were about to hear the arguments, the U.S. Congress did something dramatic. They passed a new law that blew the entire case out of the water. It's called the Clarifying Lawful Overseas Use of Data Act, or, more simply, the Cloud Act. The Cloud Act did two main things. First, it amended the old Stored Communications Act to state explicitly that U.S. service providers must comply with U.S. legal orders for data in their possession, custody, or control, regardless of where in the world that data is stored. This essentially made the government's argument in the Microsoft Ireland case the law of the land. A U.S. warrant now had extraterritorial reach. If you're a U.S. company, it doesn't matter if your server is in Dublin, Dubai, or Denmark. If the U.S. government comes with a valid warrant, you have to turn over the data. The second part of the Cloud Act created a new framework for international cooperation. It allows the U.S. to enter into executive agreements with what it calls